Hi, Jeffrey here with Auto Alchemy. This video is a response to Nathan's thought-provoking video on free will over at Love Who. You can check that out up here. Now, I know I can't end the age-old conversation about free will in 5 minutes, so I'll shoot for 10. It might help to ask, what are people really seeking from a concept of free will? In other words, how free is free enough to count? Do we need to be able to will ourselves to leap tall buildings in a single bound or solve any problem with a snap, like Thanos? No. So some constraints on our free will seem tolerable. In fact, having no constraints at all sounds like sheer torture. An acid trip life where impulse after impulse manifests and then morphs, everything too slippery to hold on to. So there's a sweet spot in the middle, and this is what we're hunting for. Many modern philosophers define free will as the ability to do otherwise, which means turning back the clock on some situation and making a different decision than the one you did. And that ability can't come from some random quirk of quantum physics, a neuron firing here as opposed to there. Your will has to be the determining factor. So the question is, do we have something like that? Nathan seems to think not, and he's got good reasons. He rightfully points out that we don't choose what thoughts pop into our head. Instead, they seem to emerge from the shadows on a silver platter. More on that later. Nathan also mentions determinism, the idea that all events are completely determined by pre-existing causes, like billiard balls in motion. But there's sometimes a sleight of hand with talk about determinism. It can be a shortcut way of saying, hey look, the science is on my side. But the problem is that determinism isn't a scientific finding, it's a scientific assumption. One that scientists make that helps them do their jobs, but which does break down with certain objects of analysis. For more on that, look into Bell's theorem and the Bell inequality. Basically, because quantum mechanics violates the Bell inequality, we have to either abandon our assumption of strict determinism or our assumption of locality, which states that an object is causally influenced only by things in its immediate vicinity. Without locality, we can't meaningfully talk about determinism anyway, because maybe you ate that third brownie due to somebody farting half a galaxy away. Either way, we end up with kooky, spooky results, and many quantum physicists choose to drop determinism. So perhaps determinism is more like a law of traffic than a law of nature. Something that most objects obey, but every now and then you get my crazy Uncle OJ. Now, Nathan also mentioned experiments that demonstrate that the movement of a person's hand can be predicted before they consciously decide to act. And if that's true, then we might have to abandon our belief in free will after all. But I think that we can work around that by revising our understanding of ourselves. I contend that part of the problem with the conversation about free will is that we have an absurdly narrow concept of what we are. You can hear that when Nathan says, we go through our lives thinking we are deciding to do things, but in reality we are just becoming aware of decisions that have already been made by our bodies and brains. But what are we if not our bodies and brains? And if the body and brain do make a decision, then aren't we making a decision? Much of the arguing over free will requires that we overly identify with the stream of consciousness of our egos, which is only a small part of who we are. We are not just free-floating minds, prisoners in our own bodies. We are biological beings that exist across time, cultural creatures that inherit ideas from the past, mysterious mortals full of hidden depths, inexplicable even to ourselves. Let's get back to that idea that free will is the ability to do otherwise. Now that we've shed the straitjacket of determinism, we can examine the raw, moment-to-moment nature of our experience and then try to pinpoint some ability to do just that. I, for one, don't usually have the embodied sense that I am a puppet dangling on strings, but sometimes I do. And when I do, it's as if I'm being possessed by some inner demon. And I can only make conceptual sense of that possession experience by contrasting it with other times where I do experience some iota of freedom. I think that there's a continuum with free will. Having the ability to do otherwise doesn't mean that we always have the ability to do otherwise, or that the otherwise in question is exactly what our ideal selves would do. If you're being overwhelmed by some addictive impulse, maybe your only choices are to cave now or 10 seconds from now. It's indisputable that we're actually constrained by our biology, by our history, by our culture. This is why I think that the only defensible notion of free will is a freedom to alter our attention and therefore our character from moment to moment. If you can wait 10 seconds before taking that drink, then maybe next time you can wait 15 seconds and then 20 seconds after that, and on and on. And this idea is supported, by the way, by those very experiments that Nathan mentioned. Benjamin Libet, one of the neurologists who carried out those experiments, believes that his work has been mischaracterized. He claims that the data reveals that there is a tiny window of time where we can consciously veto the unconscious decision to move our hand. Therefore, just because the subconscious serves something up on a silver platter doesn't mean you have to eat it. This is why I emphasized broadening our self-concept to include the fullness of who we are over a lifespan, including those shadowy parts that sometimes take the steering wheel. Our conscious will is just one piece of who we are, a collaborator that can veto and nudge and negotiate with all of our constraints, both outer and inner. We can't always do what we think we should do in the short term, but by iterating small decisions that can transform our character, we might have enough freedom for a life well lived in the long run, which is all I think matters. Maybe that's a bitter pill for folks who are too attached to a naive understanding of free will, but sometimes a bitter pill can make for good medicine. This picture of free will allows us to be more forgiving towards ourselves and others without outright eliminating responsibility from the picture. It's almost like you're sailing the ocean and you don't know what's lurking in the water around you or even where you're going half the time. All you can really do is adjust your sail and work with the wind. Well, that's it for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. What choice do you have, really? All right, until next time, happy sailing.